Yes, once again the Yu-Gi-Oh! Brainworms have gotten to me. They are, much like the VTuber brain rot, unfortunately terminal. And this time we're actually going to be talking about Joey Wheeler, absolute bonehead RNG man underdog, and somehow managing to contend against literal magic while using what amounts to a starter deck. We are here to put some respect to the man's name. Sadly, he is one of the absolute worst victims of Flanderization, much like Sokka, who, depending on different episodes, even within them being back-to-back, make him look like a bumbling moron that doesn't know how to play, and requiring RNG to bail him out to someone with a complete mastery in baiting who was planning the long game. As the resident underdog, Joey Wheeler, much like in the upcoming video we are working on involving Kong, when compared to Godzilla, lacks much of the power of Kaiba or the versatility of Yugi with their respective decks, which led to the very unfortunate trend of somewhat gamble card reliance. These were used to help pump up his monsters, or to help weaken and decapitate the monsters of the players he was going against. However, it wasn't just the luck that allowed him to win. As someone who is a Toga Flinch hacks user myself, I know better than most how RNG cannot be relied on to win alone. Something Kaiba himself even actually points out many times. It took a combination of Joey's genuine skill to get as far as he did. Hello everyone, I am Max Allo, your American Allosaurus, and if you guys haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe for more, leave a like on the video, and comment below your thoughts on Joey Wheeler and what part of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series is your favorite, and what's your favorite special summoning method? I will admit, I will always have a weakness for synchro summons. Going back to his deck specifically, on its own, it really could never stand up against the likes of characters like even Rex Raptor and My Valentine, let alone Bandit Keith. On its own, in a straight out-and-out fight, they simply outpowered him. This did give rise to the very start of, unfortunately, his trend of RNG cards, in his reliance of Time Wizard to get him those wins. In fact, that's actually how he got Red Eye's Black Dragon in the first place, is Rex put it up for ante to try and get his Time Wizard, which ultimately backfired. And he quite literally stumbled into victory against Rex throughout that entire fight, not realizing that fire monsters were able to completely negate the bonuses that dinosaur monsters were receiving, and not realizing that if he played Swamp Battle Guard and Lava Battle Guard at the same time, it would boost each other's attacking power and allow him to defeat Serpent Knight Dragon. Again, to say nothing of the Time Wizard 50-50 coin flip that allowed him to beat Red Eyes and obtain it, which would go on to become his strongest card. It's in his match against Bones where we start seeing Joey actually utilizing his strategic thinking. And for reference, we are going to be going with the anime versions of how these cards work. In the actual TCG, most of these cards do not operate anywhere near even close to where they operate in the anime, but we are going under anime rules, as we did in the last video where we covered Merrick. Here against Bones, because of the way in which Pumpkin pumped up the stats of the various zombie monsters, because Call of the Haunted turned all those three monsters that Bandit Keith basically made Bones mill into zombie monsters, the zombie counterparts of them, they would resurrect at the end of every turn and become stronger and stronger and stronger because it magnified their attack power. However, Joey was able to realize that because their defenses are 0, if he just used his Shield and Sword card, it completely destroyed them because they wouldn't be able to come back and gain any more power. While yes, Yugi and the gang were there, they did nothing but just simply offer encouragement. He was able to figure that all out on his own, the first demonstration of him actually thinking strategically and not needing to rely on the RNG. In fact, in that fight, he actually loses the Time Wizard spin. The first battle where the first and actually I believe only battle he has absolutely no RNG involvement in is the battle against Paradox. This is because this is a joint battle between Yugi and Joey against the Paradox brothers, which, side note, is legitimately one of my favorite duels in the entire series. It's even pointed out very clearly in the episodes themselves, Joey cannot simply rely on Yugi to cover for him. And because the Paradox brothers perceive his lesser experience with dueling and as such a weakness, he's actually able to use this against them and planning without even communicating with Yugi to cover one another's back. The first example of this being using Kunai with Chain to destroy Wall Shadow when Yugi puts up his Celtic Guardian as bait. Since Kunai with Chain gives both Axe Raider and Celtic Guardian an additional 500 attack points and prevents Wall Shadow from destroying the Celtic Guardian, dealing life point damage to them and destroying one of their monsters that could attack at any time. This shows just how versatile a lot of his cards are, that even though his monsters do not have the out-and-out attack power of the other major characters, his deck has several equip cards or just attack bonus cards that he can use to boost up his monsters, regardless of relying on RNG, even though many of them are more situational. Able to destroy the Dungeon Worm monster by using Flame Swordsman's Salamandra card. And it is true that both Yugi and Joey cover one another in this duel. Yugi utilizing Magic Box to destroy Jirai Gumo, and a majority of the heavy lifting in the battle being done by Yugi himself. In fact, he is the one that plays Polymerization to fuse Red Eyes Black Dragon and the Summoned Skull into the Black Skull Dragon, which allows them to defeat Gate Guardian. However, this is only possible after Joey uses Copycat to yoink Ryokun to cut in half both Parrot and Dox's life points to juice up the Black Skull Dragon. This gives Black Skull enough power to wipe out the Gate Guardian and lower their life points enough for that corresponding wipeout to actually stick, completely knocking both out of the battle. So again, while Joey was not the one doing the heavy lifting, he gave Yugi those opportunities to exploit. And without a word being communicated between either of them of their strategies, especially impressive considering Para and Dox's entire dueling decks are designed around the unique labyrinth gimmick and to be used in tandem with one another. The most impressive of these is against his Bandit Keith duel, mostly as Bandit Keith is quite literally outright cheating in his duel here. Because he does know what Joey's deck is and how it works, he deliberately counterplanned him, so already Joey's on a bad foot because he's being counterplanned. But second, he is hiding cards in his wristbands, his 7 completed, which he eventually uses to power up the slot machine. He also drops Metal Zoa, well, regular Zoa, to try to bait Joey into making a mistake, which ultimately Joey does. So Bandit Keith, even while playing dirty, Joey is able to overcome him. Keeping in mind, a lot of the cheating that he pulls out in this duel, things like storing the 7 completeds in his wristbands to juice up his monsters, those are things that would realistically work against someone like Yugi or Kaiba, who deal with out-and-out damage with both of their decks. Even though Yugi does focus more on strategy, he still relies on more aggressive beatdown tactics, as basically everyone back then did. Is simply because Joey's deck is far less orthodox than usual, this doesn't really work on him. But regardless of whether Joey fell for the Metal Zoa bait or not, he still had a contingency planned in the form of Chasm of Spikes, which did destroy Metal Zoa and dealt damage to Bandit Keith. So even though he did fall for a trap, he still thought ahead for in the event something went wrong to lay contingency plans. He even counter-baited Bandit Keith by using Garuzis to bait launcher Spider and destroying it with Kunai with Chain, which, as you can tell, is a favorite of his. Even when it comes down to RNG, this is something that both sides use. I mean, it's fairly clear that the duel between Bandit Keith and Joey are quite literally two counterparts going up against each other. Bandit Keith utilizing RNG in the form of Barrel Dragon to destroy both of Joey's monsters on the field, and then Joey himself getting the Time Wizard Time Roulette go successfully, which causes Barrel Dragon to rust and Thousand Dragon to appear. Yes, in the anime, Thousand Dragon is not a fusion monster, it is merely Baby Dragon under the effects of Time Wizard's correct spin. I know that's the way that my brother and I used to play because we didn't have a polymerization card when we were younger. Yeah, even today we still don't have a polymerization. However, all of that damage is actually undone by Time Machine, which brings back Barrel Dragon, who promptly wipes out Baby Dragon's Thousand Dragon form. So realistically, the RNG just didn't matter, because nothing changed. Well, actually, Time Machine did matter. By this time, Joey had gotten both his Red Eyes Black Dragon and Copycat, which allowed him to bring out the Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, which allowed him to wipe out Barrel Dragon once again. At this point, all Bandit Keith could do was switch his slot machine into defense mode and play Blast Sphere. When it came to his slot machine, he actually had to use his 7 completed, and these two things that he did, one of them is outright cheating. He had the 7 completed stored in his wristbands, and the Blast Sphere completely failed because even though Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon has a colossal 2,800 attack points, he still put in a contingency plan, having Dragon Nails face down, which he was able to activate, and completely foiled the entire plan of having Blast Sphere destroy Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon, causing Bandit Keith to take life point damage in return. But even after Bandit Keith was able to destroy Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon utilizing the Shield and Sword card, the craftiness and adaptability that Joey has displayed so far throughout the entire series comes back, utilizing his Grave Robber card to, after Bandit Keith yoinked one of his cards, he yoinked one of Bandit Keith's, bringing back his Time Machine and resummoning Red Eyes Black Metal Dragon. And because Black Metal Dragon returned as it was before Shield and Sword activated, there was nothing Bandit Keith could do. While he may very much be a bonehead who falls for even something as simple as a bait and switch, Bandit Keith, the American champion himself, fell for those same kind of bait and switch tactics. Even when he does have the clear advantage, he still plans for contingencies, thinking even if the other guy's got something he isn't expecting. He's not entirely reliant upon RNG, and while he does still make mistakes, he is definitely improving. And again, all of this while Bandit Keith already knew what his deck had in it. He was fighting from a massive disadvantage from the start. Somewhat similar but on friendlier terms can actually be said for his matchup against Yugi. Though against Yugi, this isn't really much of a back and forth. Yugi largely controls the entirety of the duel from the get-go, the only point of which Joey manages to somewhat take a little bit of a lead is actually only because of a long game he is playing. He deliberately baited out Summon Skull from Yugi's hand, because Summon Skull has very low defense. This is actually one of the main advantages of having Shield and Sword in his deck, is at this time most monsters had significantly lower defense than attack. In fact, some of the monsters that actually have higher defense than attack are cards that are in Joey's deck himself to actually capitalize on this. By just decapitating Summon Skull's attack, which is normally the colossal 2,500, reverting it to a much lower 1,200, he is able to destroy Summon Skull. And even though his monsters can't really stand up to Yugi's heaviest hitters outright, especially when Yugi brings out the Gaia the Dragon champion, that was actually also part of his plan, because he proceeds to use both Grave Robber and Copycat to yoink both the Polymerization and the Summon Skull, allowing him to fuse them with his Red Eyes Black Dragon to bring out the mighty Red Eyes Black Skull Dragon. At this point, there really isn't much Yugi has against it. It took a combination of Yugi utilizing Magical Hats and Spellbinding Circle to decrease the power of Black Skull Dragon, Dark Magician using Book of Secret Arts to increase its attack power to overcome Black Skull, and even then, Joey still had Garuzis with Kunai with Chain to stop Black Skull from being destroyed, showing a good amount of caution and planning for even if Yugi had a way around it. Joey actually tried to bait Yugi into making a move to bring out the Dark Magician early and destroy it, but Yugi was smart enough not to fall for this. But in the end, Yugi is able to destroy the Black Skull Dragon, and though he puts up a valiant fight, even when he busts out Time Wizard and Baby Dragon to bring out Thousand Dragon, this is not enough, as unknowingly he activated Dark Sage. which allowed Yugi to negate Thousand Dragon's attack, and then resurrect Black Skull Dragon with his own monster reborn. So while the long game is definitely something Joey is more consciousness of, he was going up against someone who knew how to play a better long game than he did, with admittedly a better deck. It's kind of a shame because this is actually the only time that Joey has ever actually summoned Black Skull Dragon. Battle Cities were arguably some of the most egregious matches, but also some of his absolute best actually happened in. He outright lost against Seeker, who was cheating. He beat Esperoba and Weevil Underwood, both of whom were also cheating. The only actual clean fight he had in the entirety of Battle City, even including the semi-finals, was Mako Tsunami and the 4-way duel. However, it also did ramp up his RNG dependence in that it added Graceful Dice and Skull Dice to his deck. His duel against Esperoba is really not a good showing because it kind of takes all of the boneheadedness and RNG dependence and concentrates it into a single duel. He starts out with trying to summon Guilty of the Night, which is a level 5 monster which cannot be summoned under Battle City rules without a tribute summon, so it is just slowly removed from the game. And then the actual RNG comes in with Swordsman of Landstar against Fiend Mega Cyber, where he uses both Graceful Dice and Skull Dice, both of which he actually needed. However, Joey Wheeler does actually call out Esperoba on his cheating, because he's able to know, hey, you said you had 2 Skull Dice, but it was 2 Graceful Dice, but it's a Skull Dice and a Graceful Dice, when realistically the whole match should have been restarted, but that's something else altogether. So I'd say in this case the RNG is kind of warranted because, yeah, cheating was kind of involved, and he did start on a bad foot kind of because cheating was still a factor. But he does actually require RNG to win against Esperoba because by the time Jinzo hits the field and the amplifier is applied, he has literally nothing that can stop it. So Roulette Spider was his only win condition. A far more egregious version of cheating is actually Weevil Underwood when he snuck Parasite into Joey's deck. Something that would turn every single one of Joey's monsters into an insect card that is equipped with a Parasite token. That's important for later. And because Weevil Underwood used Insect Barrier, it literally just stopped him from doing anything. So yes, RNG is still very much the play he had to use in this fight. He needed to utilize his dice cards in order to destroy Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth. In fact, Weevil Underwood himself comments on how the only things stronger than it outright are Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon and the Gate Guardian. He needed to use the dice in order to, 1, cripple that thing enough and power up the Parasite enough to destroy Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth. After that, even though Weevil is able to summon the Insect Queen, Joey still doesn't have anything he can use against it and needs to just burn his time until he can draw his Grave Robber card, which allows him to yoink Weevil Underwood's Cannon of Eradicating Air Assault to destroy Insect Queen, and Gearfried the Iron Knight, which he needed to draw in order to avoid the entire Parasite token bug conversion thing. Since, again, Insect Barrier stops insect monsters, because cards cannot be equipped to Gearfried the Iron Knight, and equipped cards are immediately destroyed upon being equipped to him, he is able to attack unhindered. So it shows that even though his cards do not possess raw out and out power, he is able to at the very least bide and stall his time, utilizing a card like Magic Arm Shield, and once again, showing that he is able to take what his opponent uses and use them against themselves. Sadly, his boneheadedness continues into his fight with Mako Tsunami, which realistically is probably his best match in the entire Battle City game, other than the kind of BS that is the Merrick fight. But he still boneheads into forgetting to take the Parasite out of his deck, and completely forgetting how flip effects actually work. And yes, in true Joey fashion, he does require the use of Skull Dice in order to destroy the Amphibian Beast with Alligator Sword. However, it is worth noting that this was actually a backup, as he prior planned on using Fairy Box in order to protect Alligator Sword from Amphibian Beast. And unlike in the actual TCG, Fairy Box is not a coin flip. It was just simply that Yumi stopped Fairy Box from working, so again, he is not entirely reliant on the RNG to win. He's still planning and having backups, which is good preparation. as well as he utilizes Alligator Sword Dragon and its effect of bypassing enemy monsters if they are earth, fire, or water monsters to attack directly. Considering that Mako Tsunami's entire deck are water monsters, it shows a greater degree of flexibility than going with his tried and true method of just waiting for Time Wizard, Time Roulette Go to happen. If he sees an opportunity, he will take it. Again, while it may not be as powerful as Thousand Dragon, it's more useful. And when Mako Tsunami brings out his Fortress Whale ritual monster, he may lack the out-and-out offensive punch to actually destroy it, at least initially. It is a combination of Kunai with the old faithful Kunai with Chain, and Lightning Blade, which give Panther Warrior enough power to take it down. Which actually goes back to a lot of the way he played back in Duelist Kingdom, with a somewhat of a reliance on equip cards in order to pump up his lower attack point monsters, which fundamentally isn't much different than how he uses the Graceful and Skull Dice to pump up his monster attack power. It's just one is permanent and lower power, and the other is potentially higher but only lasts for a turn. Now, it is worth noting the only real reason why this happens is because he technically is the series underdog. He can't have cards that are nearly as powerful as Yugi and Kaiba, even though I think that is honestly kind of dumb, because he does get a couple of good monsters. It's just he has like one or two good ones, and is kind of forced to rely on these, wearing it in basically any other series, considering that his counterparts in later series are characters like Akiza and Cyrus Truesdale, who have much more tech-focused kits. It's kind of more a product of the bad cards that existed at the time, and, I mean, realistically, they should have given him some of the fusion substitute monsters so he can actually summon things like Black Skull on his own. But that is a discussion for another time. Against Odeon, there really is nothing to say about Joey here that he really did well. He was getting his clock cleaned entirely by Odeon. He was simply a better duelist. It took him getting out Jinzo to shut down the entirety of his Trap Monster kit, and this just simply has to deal with something that Joey has never had any experience with. He's very much an experienced taught player, actually a lot like myself, and when put into something like, Trap Monsters, which never seen before, what the freak are these things, he just did not have any clue how to respond to it. And also, Joey was very clearly getting frustrated, and he wasn't actually playing at his best because of the head games. And he would have absolutely lost that match had Ra not come in and smited Odeon for Merrick's stupidity. Honestly, Merrick kind of screwed up everything because Odeon probably would have been able to easily finish beating him. Actually, Odeon would have just absolutely dumpstered him had he not gone for the Winged Dragon of Ra-Bet. However, since technically Joey did end up winning that fight, he went on to the 4-way duel, which, in the grand scheme of things as well, Joey really doesn't do much in this fight. It's pretty much he's a tag on, and it's a 3-way duel between Kaiba, Merrick, and Yugi, with him just tagging along. He does use Skull Dice, however it is immediately cancelled out by Kaiba using his own Shrink card on Gearfried, quite literally just to troll Joey. And really the only other two things of note he does throughout the entire duel is, one, convince Yugi to attack him and not Merrick. But he does actually have a plan which is not involving an actual duel. It involves him wanting to fight Merrick one-on-one. So, I mean, he's playing the long game, just not the long game in terms of this specific duel. So credit to the guy. But most impressive of all is he absolutely baits Kaiba into popping his own Ring of Destruction to wipe out Joey's life points, only for Joey to yoink Merrick's Spell of Pain to transfer the damage over to Merrick instead. So yes, he baited Kaiba. It's really not much, but it's something. And I just think that's impressive. As for his duel against Merrick in the semifinals, we've actually been over this entire duel before in the video where we covered Merrick being an absolute turbo fraud, so I'm kind of not going to go into the entirety of this here. That I do a lot more comprehensively in that video. But it is worth noting two very important things about this fight. Joey routinely was able to break through what Merrick was planning in this fight. as well as the fact that Merrick wanted to spend the majority of this duel, in fact the entirety of this duel was basically centered around Merrick utilizing shadow magic to prolong Joey's torture. He wasn't going for an out-and-out knockout win, he just simply wanted to torment him. But to Merrick's credit, he was using a very effective burn deck. It was layered with many layers of redundancy to counteract if Joey was able to break through him, but Joey was able to consistently break through the contingencies meant to counter if he was able to break through them. Again, Merrick doesn't really rely on dueling skill, he relies a lot more on shadow magic. Not to mention, this is also a duel where Joey's RNG kind of actually fails him, and also doesn't fail him, because he uses Graceful Dice to power up the Plasma Eel to shut down Machine Duplication, but even though he makes the Plasma Eel have a 3000 attack point, he has Go for the Lightning, which just wipes it out of existence anyway. So, like, it realistically didn't matter, he just needed to get the thing to have a 2 or higher because that would stop Machine Duplication. And even though Merrick is the holder of the most overpowered, overkitted, absolute nonsense in the game, the Winged Dragon of Ra, which has like 8 bajillion different effects, Joey actually would have beaten him. Because when Merrick uses the Winged Dragon of Ra Phoenix mode's destruction effect to destroy Go for the Lightning, even though he had to pay 1,000 life points to do it, even had he not done that, one, Merrick would have gotten him beaten anyway, because getting Go for the Lightning would have stopped and just taken out the rest of his life points. If he had some other method of removing Guilford the Lightning that did not rely on utilizing the Winged Dragon of Ra's effect, his life points were still below Gearfried the Iron Knight, which is what Joey drew next. So even if Merrick had some way of doing things, Joey still beat him. Well, would have beaten him. Joey outplayed the guy who had the most overtuned deck in existence at that time of the series. The card holder that it took the combined brain power of Yugioh and Kaiba to beat using 2 Egyptian gods, Fiend Sanctuary, and understanding how to outplay him. Joey was able to beat more or less on his own. Again, only lost because of shadow magic. I think that is worth something. I mean, Merrick is legitimately panicking in that fight at the end because he did not realize Joey could actually have taken it. I think that's worth something. For Joey's, the reason why we're not covering the rest of the filler arcs is, one, they kind of flanderize Joey's RNG reliance a lot more, and they're also not canon. So, because again, they're fillers. So we don't really deal with the fillers here. Even though he does have some legitimately good showings in them, it would be cherry-picking the episodes he does extremely well in and leaving out the ones that are ones where he does have RNG reliance, and it's just a disingenuous way of representing things, so I just leave out the fillers altogether. So the last match we're going to be going over is actually his duel against Kaiba. When it comes to Joey's duel against Kaiba for the 3rd place, it's kind of an interesting match, but not for the reasons you'd think it is. Kaiba utilizes his standard crush card tactic against Joey, which is something that, considering Joey has cards like Grave Robber and Copycat, which yoink your own cards to use against you, is a bit of a dumb decision, because Kaiba's already been on the receiving end of that kind of a tactic from Pegasus earlier on in the series, and with how powerful his entire deck is, he knows that can cripple him. As well as the fact that in order to activate Crush card, he needs to give Joey what amounts to a free shot at him. Yes, it does speak to Kaiba's ego, that he can give Joey what amounts to a free shot and still take him down, but considering what he ends up taking out of Joey's deck, it's not really worth it. Joey does not have many powerful cards that exist above 1,500 attack points. He has Panther Warrior, Go for the Lightning, and the card that he did win from the other duelist in Duelist Kingdom, but that maybe amounts to 5 to 7 cards, because it doesn't consider extra deck monsters. As well as considering that most of Joey's cards are equipped cards that bolster his own monster's attack power, things like Kunai with Chain and Disgraceful and Skull Dice, as well as Lightning Blade, he has other means of powering his monsters up. In fact, this is actually what he does with Swordsman of Landstar. It does speak a lot more into Kaiba's ego when it comes to the way he battled in this fight, but he does show legitimate frustration when Joey does manage to outmaneuver him, utilizing Grave Robber to actually take his own enemy controller card, destroy his Blue Eyes White Dragon, and use Monster Reborn to resummon it. Now, realistically, Joey could have again turned Crush card back on him. He doesn't. Even Time Wizard is not able to save Joey here, as again, Kaiba's deck possesses far more consistency, not relying on chance, and Kaiba himself does call Joey out for his amateur's luck tactics. But again, the guy does display legitimate frustration when Joey manages to outmaneuver him. And up until the end of the fight, it's not really so much a curb stomp. Now, that was a lot to take in. And all of that taken together, does Joey use RNG so heavily that it is a staple of next to every fight he has, and pretty much a central piece of his deck? Yes. But does he need it to win? This I will have to say is a no. He has displayed more than enough intelligence to win on his own. He is very quick at adapting and picking apart opponent strategies when it comes to duels. This is not really something we see a lot of other duelists do, and even further, that with his own cards to take control of their cards, or at least copy them, it shows he is able to adapt very quickly and understand how a card is used and use it himself. Utilizing cards that are not your own and using them to exceptionally good effect is not something we tend to see from a lot of duelists throughout the entire series, not just the original series. More impressively than that is his ability to contend with legitimate magic users. Both Yugi and Kaiba are using magic in their duels, even if they are not doing it consciously or deliberately. This is how they are able to draw the cards that they need when they need it, in addition to their skill and understanding of the game itself to utilize their cards to the maximum capabilities. Joey just has that natural skill and understanding to work with, using what amounts to a fairly mediocre deck at the time, even by the standards of what existed back then. He later on does get his spot in the sun. He wants to go pro as stated in Dark Side of Dimensions, but is struggling with money to get a new dual disc. And by the time of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, which Dark Side of Dimensions is canon to both the anime and the manga, and Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, which is canon to the anime, and set 10 years post the original series, Pegasus, who is still alive in this series, states that Joey is the third best duelist behind both Yugi and Kaiba. And he is above characters like Jesse Anderson and Aster Phoenix. Keep in mind, he is saying this to Aster Phoenix, someone who is extremely competitive and the best in the pros. Given how competitive Aster is, this really can't be excused as simple fan service because, again, the guy is insanely competitive. If he heard that there's this Joey Wheeler guy who's just had a mediocre record at dueling, that would be something he'd mention, and yes, it's very likely Pegasus could be referring to, at least from the audience perspective, referring to the caliber of opponents that he's beaten, helped save the world multiple times. But again, Aster Phoenix is someone who is very well versed in competitive pro scene. If he picked up that Joey Wheeler was not this competent opponent, he would have said something. The fact that he doesn't shows, by that time, Joey's deck had more than likely evolved into something new. And considering that in Dark Side of Dimensions it is confirmed that Joey does have his Red Eyes Black Dragon again, means he was able to not quite possibly win it back from Yugi, as the only way that he was going to be accepting returning Red Eyes to him is if he became a better duelist worthy of using it. And we also know that if he just beat Yugi and Yugi was going easy on him, he wouldn't have accepted it. So Joey needed to legitimately get a lot better in the series. It is a bit unfortunate the reputation he has developed, especially considering that a lot of those gamble cards were really just to supplement his monsters, which again, at the time, were pretty bad anyways. As the underdog, he wasn't able to really have a lot of strong monsters, whereas Yugi and Kaiba continued to get more and more powerful cards. Joey kind of stayed with mostly the same kind of weak cards throughout really everything. More unfortunately is that when it came to the more modern side characters that filled the exact same role as Joey, again, characters like Akiza and Cyrus Truesdale, Their cards, while weak, have a variety of technical effects to compensate for their lack of power. In fact, Akiza is actually more or less a counterpart to Joey specifically, the Red Eyes Black Dragon and the Black Rose Dragon being counterparts to one another. And probably that's an entire video all on its own, how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is great with counterparts. Well, I know that was a lot to take in, and I am not looking forward to editing this monstrosity of a video together. But what do you guys think of Joey Wheeler? This was something I kind of made hand in hand to go with an upcoming video I'm doing on King Kong, especially Monster vs. King Kong, and why he no longer kind of really fits the traditional role of an underdog. And don't worry, there's been a guy commenting about wanting me to do a video on the Gorosaurus. Don't worry, that is coming. It is an Allosaurus. I like it. Don't worry, it's a thing that is existing. But yeah, comment your thoughts below what you thought of the video. Agree with me, disagree with me. While down there, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. I've been Max Allo, your American Allosaurus, and long live the Kaiju King.